We love finding errors in Peppa Pig as much as you guys love seeing them. So in this video, we're going to show all the mistakes we've found in Peppa Pig till now. In the episode Windmills, we can see Peppa and her classmates making a paper windmill. Everyone has different colored paper. And if we look at Susie Sheep's paper, we notice that it is cyan colored. Now look carefully. When everyone makes their paper windmill and runs outside the classroom, we can notice that Susie Sheep's windmill is dark blue. But earlier, we saw her paper was cyan colored. And that's not all. When all of the students arrive at the site where Mr. Bull is building an actual windmill, we can notice that Susie's paper windmill is now green colored. Maybe Susie Sheep has got a magical color changing paper. Moving on, in the episode Thunderstorm, we noticed a funny error. Here, Peppa and George are playing in the garden when they hear thunder. Peppa and George get a bit frightened and go running inside the house. But when they all get inside the house, Peppa realizes that she has left her teddy bear in the garden. Now look carefully. We can see there's a teddy bear lying on the ground. And if we notice the background, there's nothing. But when Daddy Pig goes to get the teddy, we can notice a tree in the background. The tree basically appeared out of nowhere. In the episode Pancakes, Mummy Pig is making everyone pancakes. The whole pig family is sitting in Mummy Pig's magical kitchen. If you have watched our previous era videos, then you would know that Mummy Pig's kitchen is magical because things appear and disappear from thin air in there. So here we can see that Mummy Pig is preparing ingredients for pancakes. Let's look at the milk jug. As we can see, it is filled slightly above the handle. But after Mummy Pig pours the milk into the flour mix, we can notice that the milk is still at the same level as before. It seems like Mummy Pig has found an infinite milk glitch. In the episode Grampy Rabbit's Lighthouse, Grandad Dog takes Peppa Pig, George Pig, and Danny Dog to visit and learn more about Grampy Rabbit's lighthouse. And when they arrive at the lighthouse, we can notice that Grandad Dog has a clean vest. He has nothing on it, right? But in the next scene, when Grandad Dog is giving Grampy Rabbit some items, we can notice that he has got mud stain on his shirt and face. Like, how's this even possible? The mud stain literally came out of nowhere. In the episode Princess Peppa, Granny and Grandpa Pig come for a dinner party with Mummy and Daddy Pig. Granny Pig decides to surprise Peppa and George by sneaking into their room. When she enters Peppa and George's room, we can notice that the moon can be seen through the left panel of the window. Moments later, Granny Pig accidentally steps onto a rubber duck and Peppa wakes up. And notice the moon again. This time, it is on the right panel of the window. But earlier, it was on the left panel. Now, this next mistake is absolutely hilarious. In the episode The Train Ride, Madame Gazelle takes Peppa and her friends on a train ride where they must check off what they see on their activity sheets. But at the train station, Pedro loses his ticket. Now look carefully at the ground. We can clearly see there's nothing there. But moments later, when Madame Gazelle arrives, Zoe Zebra points towards the ground, and there appears Pedro's train ticket. There's no way that ticket was originally there. Maybe Zoe Zebra had probably hidden the ticket, and when Pedro was looking at Madame Gazelle, she threw his ticket on the ground. In the episode The Baby Piggy, Peppa and George are visiting their big cousin Chloe, and we'll get to meet Chloe's new baby brother, Alexander, for the first time. Later in the episode, Peppa's friends also come to see baby Alexander. Right here we can see that Susie is standing behind Zoe Zebra. But when the scene zooms out, Susie Sheep magically appears in front of Zoe Zebra. In the episode Best Friend, Peppa Pig invites her best friend Susie Sheep over to play. We see them taking various toys out of a basket and scattering them on the floor. But when George wants to join the fun, Peppa doesn't allow him. Poor Georgie. Anyway, after this scene, we return to the same spot and notice that the little horn that was next to the green notebook on the floor has disappeared. Then we see it magically on the other side of the room, and that's not all. When the girls take the toys out of the basket, one of the first is a Jack in the Box, which even opens up when they take it out. However, after talking to George shortly after, we can see that the toy is no longer on the floor of the room, but unlike the horn, we don't see it again. Maybe the animators were a little lazy to clean up all that mess. In the episode The Fish Pond, Daddy Pig is looking forward to taking Peppa and George to visit a fish pond that he used to visit when he was a piglet. Notice that both Peppa and George have an ice cream cone in their hand. And while they are walking towards the pond, the ice cream is still in their hand. But when Daddy Pig is talking with Miss Rabbit, the scene zooms out. Now notice Peppa and George's hand. The ice cream cone has disappeared. I doubt they were able to finish that in one bite. This is definitely a mistake. Moving on, in the episode Kylie Kangaroo and her family go to Peppa's house for a visit. When they are at the house, the entire pig family comes outside to greet them. Now look carefully at the pig family. We can notice that Peppa and George are standing right in front of Daddy and Mummy Pig. But the issue is, when the scene zooms into Peppa, Mummy and Daddy Pig disappear from the frame. But earlier, we saw they were right behind Peppa and George. There's one more mistake in this episode, and it is even funnier. After Peppa and George meet Kylie Kangaroo and her brother Joey, Peppa shows Kylie how to jump up and down in muddy puddles. Now, look at the size of Muddy Puddle. It's quite small. But when other characters start to jump in the puddle, the size of it magically changes. We can clearly see the puddle changing its size out of nowhere. Going back to the Best Friend episode, we noticed some more mistakes that happened throughout the episode. When Susie and Peppa are near the toy basket right at the beginning of the episode, we can see that on the wall behind them, there are 2 dinosaur drawings. However, shortly after, when we see the 2 girls again, lying on the floor having fun, we see that the drawings on the wall are no longer there. A little later, when George comes down to eat the cookie dough, he hears Peppa and Susie having fun. Then we see the 2 again, but this time, we see that there is a drawing on the wall again. However, this time it's not the dinosaur drawings that were there before, but a drawing of an elephant and a sun. The funny thing is that this drawing appeared earlier in the series, but it was next to Peppa and George's bunk bed. It seems like the paintings have a mind of their own. In the episode Sleepover, Peppa goes to Zoe Zebra's house for a sleepover. And as always, they're having a lot of fun. When Mummy and Daddy Zebra waves them goodnight and turn off the lights, notice that there are 2 paintings hanging on the wall. But in the next scene, when Peppa and her friends get ready to sleep, we can't see the paintings on the wall anymore. But in the next scene, when Zoe Zebra's twin sisters start crying, the painting magically reappears on the wall. And that's not all. Later in the episode, Peppa and friends decide to sneakily go to kitchen to get some food. And they successfully do so. But Mummy Zebra finds out what they are doing and tells them to sleep. And when all of the kids go to sleep, we can also see the painting behind them. But the issue is, that's a different painting than before. Let's compare these 2 paintings. As we can see, these are completely different paintings. Did someone magically change the painting? Or is there some kind of ghost living in Zoe Zebra's house? Whatever might be the reason, it was indeed a strange mistake. Moving on, in the episode The Eye Test, Peppa goes to Daddy Pony's clinic to get her eye tested. Daddy Pony tests Peppa's eye to see if she needs glasses. But that's not the issue here. Look at the shelf behind Peppa. We can notice that there are lots of glasses placed on the shelf. And look at this glass right behind Peppa. As we can see, it is green in color. But in the next scene, when Daddy Pony is testing Peppa's eye, we can see that the glass behind Peppa is purple colored. And not only that, but the shape of the frame has also changed too. Originally, the glass was green with circular frame, but here it is purple colored in square frame. It seems like animators forgot the original color and shape of the glasses. In the episode Sun, Sea and Snow, Peppa and her friends and family are looking forward to a trip to the seaside where they can make sandcastles. But when they arrive at the beach, there is too much snow. The entire beach is covered with snow, which means no sandcastle for Peppa and friends. But Mummy Pig decides to go for a swim, which we must say isn't the greatest of ideas in these conditions. Anyway, Mummy Pig decides she's going to swim, so she takes off her clothes and dives in the sea. And as soon as she lands in the water, she realizes her mistake. But wait, let's look at the shore. There are no clothes there. But in the earlier scene, Mummy Pig put her clothes right there. Well, it seems like this wasn't a good day for Mummy Pig. Firstly, she dived into ice-cold water, and now her clothes disappeared into thin air. Now, this next mistake is really shocking. In the episode Lost Keys, Peppa and her family go on a trip to a mountain scenic spot. But on the way down, Daddy Pig loses the car keys down the drain. And to get the keys out from the drain, they decide to buy a fishing rod so that they can hook the keys out. So, Mrs. Rabbit sells them a fishing rod, and Daddy Pig throws the fishing line in the drain. Unfortunately, the fishing line isn't long enough to reach the keys. Now, pay attention, because here comes the mistake. Mrs. Rabbit decides to throw a stone down the drain to check its depth, And as you can hear, when the stone reaches down the drain, it makes a splash sound, meaning there's water on the bottom. Later in the episode, Mr. Bull arrives on the scene with a crane, and he uses the crane to get the keys. But wait, look at the bottom, there's no trace of water. But earlier, when Mrs. Rabbit threw a stone, we heard a splash sound. But in this scene, there's no water there. It's a weird error, isn't it? This next error is really hilarious. In the episode Goldie the Fish, the pig's family pet, Goldie the Fish, does not look happy and is not eating her food. So, Peppa, George, and Mummy Pig take her on a trip to visit Dr. Hamster the vet. Dr. Hamster treats Goldie the Fish, and the pig family goes back to their home. When they reach home, Daddy Pig comes home from work. Now here comes the mistake. Look at Daddy Pig's attire. He's wearing a white shirt with a tie. In simple words, he's in his work clothes. But in the next scene, when we see him, he's wearing his home clothes, and there's no shirt or a tie. It seems like Daddy Pig can instantly change his clothes on the spot. In the episode Edmund Elephant's Birthday, we see Peppa, George, and their friends celebrating Edmund Elephant's birthday. They all decided to play a variety of fun games, and the first party game is musical statues. All the toddlers want to play the game, and Peppa explains the rules. When the music is playing, they dance, and when it stops, freeze like a statue. The toddlers start dancing to Peppa's command. Round by round, each one gets eliminated, and finally, one of the zebra twins wins the game, and she gets a gold medal for the win. Now look carefully, because here comes the mistake. Now the toddlers want to play Pass the Parcel, where they pass each other a parcel side by side. And notice that the winner of musical statue is sitting beside George with her medal on. Now the game starts and everyone passes the parcel turn by turn, but when the parcel gets to George, look at the zebra twin by his side, she doesn't have the medal. But earlier we saw the zebra twin with the medal sit beside George. Seems like even the animators got confused with the twins. Now, this next mistake is really amusing. In the episode Mr. Potato's Christmas Show, all of the students in Peppa's class gather in a theater to see Mr. Potato's show, and notice that Peppa is sitting in the last row with some of her friends. And also in the front row, we can notice a cat is sitting. Now pay close attention, because the mistake here is really funny. Later in the episode, Pedro Pony decides to change seat due to some issue, and the scene zooms into Peppa. Now look, the cat that was sitting in the front row magically appears in front of Peppa. And when the scene zooms out again, the cat magically goes back to sit in the front row, and the two seats in front of Peppa are occupied by someone else. In the episode Daddy Pig's Birthday. Here, we see the whole family involved in making the birthday cake for Daddy Pig, and we see various ingredients on the table like milk, eggs, and flour. Also, there's a wooden spoon on the table next to the chocolate pieces that will be used in the cake. Then, Mummy Pig starts putting all the ingredients in a large bowl. And when the scene widens, note that the wooden spoon magically moved from where it was on the table to right next to Mummy Pig. It seems that besides making cakes, Mummy Pig also knows how to do magic. And it seems that George has also inherited the ability to do magic tricks from Mummy Pig, because right after this scene, Peppa asks to mix the cake batter, and George is by her side. Now look at George's hand. There's nothing in it, but in a split second, a second spoon appears in the little pig's hand. George seems to be following Mummy Pig's footsteps. In the episode Breakfast Club, Peppa and her friends are at school very early, planning to have breakfast together. When it's time for breakfast, Peppa and her friends ask for toast. Madame Gazelle brings the super toaster. And notice that the toaster has space for 9 toasts. Madame Gazelle puts 9 toasts on the toaster. After a while, the toast is ready, and everyone gets a piece. But wait, there are 12 kids, and everyone has a toast. But how's this possible when there were only 9 pieces of toast in the toaster? Seriously, these animation errors have toasted my brain. In the episode Captain Daddy Pig, the entire pig family can be seen going on a boating trip, and the first error can be found at the moment they leave on the boat. Initially, you can see that there's nothing on the metal pole. But seconds later, a bell magically appears. Now that's weird, isn't it? In the same episode, we found another funny error. If we look at the picnic blanket on the boat, we notice that it is filled with a variety of food items. When Peppa and George start feeding bread to the ducks, the scene zooms out, and the food that was on the picnic blanket is no longer there. This is definitely a mistake, because I don't think Daddy Pig was able to devour the entire food within seconds. Now this next error is also a weird one. Let's look at the moment when Peppa and George go running towards Mummy Pig. As we can see, first it's Peppa and then George, but seconds later the position changes. Now George is first and then Peppa. Later in the episode, the pig family returns from the boating trip. Grandpa Pig and Grandma Pig are waiting for them. And if we look at the end part of the boat, it is empty, there's nothing there. But seconds later, a piece of metal appears out of nowhere. As we all know, there's a good chance Madame Gazelle is very likely a vampire, especially since she has no shadow as we discovered in the Halloween episode. But it seems we've discovered another superpower of the Madame Gazelle: invisibility. This happens in the episode where she introduces little Emily Elephant to her new classmates. Notice that as she does this, she and Emily are side by side, with Madame Gazelle right behind the girl. However, as soon as we get a closer look at Emily, Madame Gazelle puts on her invisibility cloak, and we don't see her anymore. There's definitely something fishy going on with Madame Gazelle. In one of the episodes where Peppa is building a castle for a school project, we see the family's table filled with materials like pens, papers, and pencils. Next to the box of crayons, there are various items such as straws, colored sheets, and even some colored pencils. However, when Peppa answers Susie's call, notice that all the materials disappear from that part of the table, leaving only the box of crayons. Still talking about that colorful crayon box, notice that we have 3 units inside the box and 3 outside. But in the next scene, when Peppa answers her friend's call, the 3 sticks that were on the table mysteriously disappear. Not only that, now there are 4 crayon sticks scattered on the floor and another 3 on the kitchen sink counter next to Daddy Pig's head. Additionally, notice that between the scenes, the kitchen sink that was previously near the window disappears completely as well. In the episode where Peppa's class goes camping, we also noticed a quite interesting continuity error. First, in the scene, we see Mrs. Wolf teaching the children how to create soap bubbles. The detail is that right after, in the next scene, the tools to make soap bubbles simply disappear from the hands of all the children. Returning to the same school project episode, we also noticed another weird error that hardly anyone noticed. Notice that when Mummy Pig answers the phone, as always, the buttons are in various different colors. In this case, the first one is orange, the second one yellow, and the third is light gray. The first bottom one is blue. However, when she passes the phone to Peppa, the button colors completely change, and the light gray and orange buttons switch places, just like the bottom blue button is now in a different place. In the episode where the little tortoise ends up falling on Pedro Pony's nose when he shakes the tree, a funny error happens. When Pedro's dad is called, we see he's wearing a beautiful blue bow tie. However, when everyone realizes after several minutes that the poor tortoise is still upside down, notice that the beautiful bow tie has disappeared from Dr. Pony's outfit. Moving on. When Peppa and her family arrive at Daddy Pig's brother's house, we can see that the door handle is on one side of the door when the family opens it. But when we see the children inside the house, note that it's as if the door has reverse sides, since its handle has moved to the opposite side from what we saw before. Furthermore, the door mysteriously appeared closed when they entered the house, when in fact it should still be open. Going back to Chloe's puppet show at home, we can notice some more errors. When Chloe shows the box with the puppet models to be painted, we can see that there are 4 puppets inside, of which Peppa's cousin pulls one out, and we can notice that only 3 remain inside the box. However, right in the next scene, after painting 2 eyes on the puppet she was holding, the box still has 4 puppets inside and 1 more in Chloe's hand, now totaling 5 dolls. It's kind of like the miracle of puppet multiplication. The strangest thing is that we see when Chloe takes out the puppet to make the dinosaur puppet that George asks for, the number of puppets in the box changes abruptly once again, this time going back to having 3 puppets as it should be. Chloe then takes the puppet to paint as George asked, and only 2 remain in the box. Notice that they are close side by side, and that's when we notice another mistake happening when the scene changes angle again. We see that there are still 2 puppets inside the box, but unlike before, now each of them is at one end of the box, which makes no sense. In the episode where George gets a new dinosaur, we realize that Peppa's world is a little different from ours. Besides talking animals and vegetables, celestial bodies tend to disappear quite frequently when we're in Peppa and George's room. We can see that it's night, exactly because we see stars and a moon in the children's room window. But when the scene changes and focuses only on Daddy and Mommy Pig, we realize that the moon that was in the window went for a walk since it disappeared. In the episode George's Friends, we notice another animation error related to objects that appear and disappear, and in this case, it's about the sand buckets that George and his friend were playing with. We can see that they are there close to the children. Then Peppa Pig start a little argument to defend each of their brothers in the game, and notice that when the image expands again, the 2 sand buckets have disappeared as if they had never been there. Did the boys throw them in the air while none of us were looking at them? Going back to Chloe's puppet show episode, besides that hide-and-seek game of small puppets from the puppet show, we have one more inexplicable thing that happens inside Chloe's room. Note that on the girl's bed, there's a stuffed animal that apparently is a panda bear. Besides, we see a ball at the foot of the same bed as Peppa's cousin. But when we get to the part where the children are having fun painting their dolls and puppets, we can notice that both the ball and the stuffed animal have simply disappeared as if by magic. In this episode, we meet Super Potato, who goes to Peppa's school to save Mr. Potato, who got stuck inside his car. He then uses his super strength to remove the glass roof of the car. The mistake here is that even before he completely removes the lid, Mr. Potato gets out of the car, passing through the glass roof, which completely goes against the laws of physics. It seems like it's Mr. Potato who is an actual superhero. In the episode Ballet Lesson, when Peppa arrives at school and starts dancing with her classmates, we can see Danny Dog jump to the left side and off the frame, but seconds later, we can see him appear on the right side. It seems like Danny Dog can do teleportation. And it isn't the only mistake in this scene. Let's look at Danny Dog closely. We can see his ears are together in this scene, but the moment he appears on the right side, his ears are apart. There's a significant gap between them. Now that's a weird mistake. Now this next mistake is an interesting one. In this scene, as we can see, there is a kitchen counter, and next to it there is a garbage can. However, seconds later, when Peppa runs with a horse, we can see that the garbage can disappeared and is replaced by recycling boxes. Now this next mistake is a weird one. Here we can see Peppa and her friends are outdoors playing soccer. And in the background, we can see there are 4 trees, and these trees have fruits. But the issue is, in the next scene, all the fruits from these trees completely disappear. Pretty weird, isn't it? In the episode The Museum, Peppa goes to a museum with her family. She's exploring the museum and having a lot of fun. And in one of the scenes, where Peppa is looking at a crown on a shelf, we can see that in the background there's a plain purple wall behind her. But when it zooms to Peppa, we don't see the purple wall, but instead, we see a glass cabinet. But in the scene earlier, it was just a purple wall behind her. In the episode Miss Rabbit's Day Off, we can see Daddy Pig oversees the ice cream cart. Now take a close look at the arrangement of ice cream flavors. When Daddy Pig is in a call with Peppa, the scene switches, and when it gets back to Daddy Pig, look at the colors of ice cream, it has changed. In the episode Power Cut, we can see both Peppa and George happily dancing to the music coming from the speaker in the family's living room. Later in the episode, there's a power cut, and everything goes dark. And the family makes a cardboard TV, everyone is having fun, and then the power suddenly comes back. But that's not the only thing. If you look at the speaker, you'll notice that it's now facing the opposite direction from before the power outage. I think it was a small animation mistake, and not some ghost living in Peppa's house. Moving on, in the episode Picnic, the entire pig family goes outdoors for a small picnic. Now, let's look at the picnic blanket. There are many delicious things on it, including 2 sandwiches. The detail is that in the next scene, we see all 4 family members with sandwiches in hand. Additionally, there are 4 plates on the ground, 2 more than before, and 2 glasses of orange juice that also appeared out of nowhere. One next to Mummy Pig and another next to Daddy Pig. Even the orange juice carton itself mysteriously disappears. It seems as if someone is doing some sort of magic. In the episode Daddy Pig's Birthday, we can see Daddy Pig on his office working. And there's a board full of calculations and math figures next to Daddy Pig. In the meantime, Peppa Pig and George call Daddy Pig's office. When Mr. Rabbit passes the call to his co-worker, magically, the board moves to be behind Daddy Pig. Additionally, notice that even the calculations written on the board undergo a slight modification. For example, in the first scene, we see some blue letters, a purple circle, and the letters F and X. However, when Daddy Pig is on the phone with Peppa, the writing completely changes, and we see a red equation, a blue 1 + 1 sum, and some letters and numbers in yellow. In the same scene, we also notice that the cup with colored pencils behind Daddy Pig ends up switching places. First, the purple pencil is in one corner and the pink one in another. However, in the next scene, the two pencils swap sides, each ending up on the opposite side. It seems like animators of this show like to switch things mid-scene. In the episode where George needs to eat a salad after pizza, we noticed some magical occurrence. In one of the scenes, Grandma Pig puts a cucumber and 2 pieces of tomato on George's plate. And as we know, George isn't the biggest fan of vegetables, and his expression says that's not exactly what he wanted, so it's obvious that he doesn't want to eat any of those vegetables. That's why it doesn't make much sense that when we see George's plate again, after everyone finishes their pizza slices, there's only 1 tomato piece on it. Either this is a mistake, or George ate the piece when no one was looking, which I doubt. In the episode Swimming, we can see a changing room with 4 doors, each one a different color. Daddy Pig comes out of the first blue door, Mummy Pig from the green door, Peppa from the yellow door, and George from the red door. The doors remain exactly like this throughout the episode. But when we get to the end, something weird happens. The colors of the doors change completely, and their order is reversed. The first door becomes red, and the last one blue, and all the colors are reversed. In the episode Market, there's a fair going on in Peppa's town. In one of the scenes, we can see that in the corner, there's a lamppost between Mr. Bull's stall and the apple stall. However, when the scene zooms in again and we see the stall in the corner, the lamppost has disappeared. Additionally, we also noticed another mistake. In this scene, we see a small pigeon pecking at the canvas of Miss Cow's tent, which later became Mr. Bull's tent. However, in the next scene, this same pigeon moves over to Mr. Bull's stall. Still in the same episode, we noticed another interesting detail. As we said earlier, Mr. Bull's stall and the apple stall are side by side. However, when the Peppa's family appears, we can see that the space between the 2 stalls becomes much larger, and Mr. Bull's stall simply disappears from the scene. In the episode, Once Upon a Time, Peppa is reading a story to George. And if we look at the room, we can notice various items scattered randomly. And right behind George, we can see a cat drawing, and right under the cat drawing, we can notice a toy car lying upside down. But the mistake is, right when Mummy Pig enters the room, the toy car disappears. Even if we look at the entire room, it cannot be found anywhere. Seems like the toy car drove onto the sunset by itself. In the episode Shopping, Mummy Pig, Daddy Pig, Peppa and George go to the supermarket. And in one of the scenes, we can notice the pig family in the vegetable aisle. When Peppa puts one item in the shopping cart, we can see Daddy Pig cross the item off the shopping list. And if we look at the background, we can see they're still in the vegetable aisle. But the mistake is, after Daddy Pig crosses the item off the list, the scene switches to George, and all of a sudden, they're now in a different aisle. Within a split second, they moved from one aisle to another. In the episode Bedtime, during the intro, as always, we can notice Peppa's house, and on the right side of her house, we can also see the sun that is about to set. But the issue is when the scene zooms in towards Peppa's kitchen, we can notice that the sun is still on the right side of their house. But when we enter the kitchen, the sun can be seen through the window. This makes no sense. This is a logical error. In the same episode, when the pig family is having dinner together, if we look at the dinner plates, we can notice that only George has finished his food. Daddy Pig, Mummy Pig, and Peppa have yet to finish theirs. But moments later, when Daddy Pig says he's tired, we get another shot of the dinner table, and if we look at Peppa's plate, it's empty. I don't think Peppa was able to eat the entire plate in one bite. This is definitely an error. Moving on, in the episode Grampy Rabbit's Jetpack, Grampy Rabbit decides to build a jetpack. And in one of the scenes, we can notice him showing his jetpack to Peppa and George. Now let's zoom at the jetpack. Here we can see a speed meter on the side of the jetpack. So far, so good. But moments later, when the scene changes and Grampy Rabbit is holding the jetpack, we can notice that the speed meter is no longer there. But earlier, it was right there. And that's not all. As soon as Grampy Rabbit puts on the jetpack, the speed meter can be seen again. Now this next mistake is really weird. In the episode The Pumpkin Competition, it's Halloween, and Peppa has been helping Grandpa Pig carve his massive pumpkin. But the mistake here is that the pumpkin magically changes in size. It all starts when Madame Gazelle announces that there will be a competition at school. Later in the episode, Grandpa Pig picks up Peppa, and she tells him that there's a competition to see who has the best pumpkin. Moments later, Grandpa Pig takes Peppa to his greenhouse, where he has grown a very large pumpkin. Now, look closely at the size of the pumpkin. As you can see, it is much larger than the door of the greenhouse. However, when Grandpa Pig takes the pumpkin out of the greenhouse, it fits easily through the door. But earlier, we clearly saw that the pumpkin was much bigger than the door. So, did Grandpa use magic to reduce the pumpkin size? In the episode Pancakes, Mummy Pig is making everyone pancakes. The whole pig family is sitting in Mummy Pig's magical kitchen. If you have watched our previous error videos, then you would know that Mummy Pig's kitchen is magical because things appear and disappear from thin air in there. So, here we can see that Mummy Pig is preparing ingredients for pancakes. Let's look at the milk jug. As we can see, it is filled slightly above the handle. But after Mummy Pig pours the milk into the flour mix, we can notice that the milk is still at the same level as before. It seems like Mummy Pig has found an infinite milk glitch. In the episode Parachute Jump, when Peppa and George tell Mummy Pig about the skydiving thing, we can notice a fridge in the background. And on the fridge door, there are various types of stickers. Now look carefully at these two stickers, the A and the B. But the mistake is, when the scene zooms onto Mummy Pig, the B sticker simply disappears. Now, let's look at a really funny mistake. In the episode, The Ambulance, when Dr. Bear is giving safety instructions and tells everyone to watch where they step, he trips over a ball and rolls down the hill, falling into prickly plants. When this funny scene happens, we can notice that the ambulance back door is completely closed. But right after, we see Dr. Bear landing beside an apple tree with apples falling on his head. We see the kids and Madame Gazelle, but note that now the back door of the ambulance is open, but it wasn't before. Who opened that door since everyone was watching Dr. Bear fall down the hill? Immediately after, we see Madame Gazelle and the children getting into the ambulance to help Dr. Bear, who is completely injured. As we can see, Madame Gazelle enters through the driver's door, and the rest of the kids enter through the back doors. We see that at the back doors are Peppa Pig and Molly Mole on either side. The mistake is that when the ambulance arrives at the scene, we notice that Peppa is still there, but on the other side, and where Peppa was before, now stands Rebecca Rabbit, and Molly is nowhere to be seen. Besides that, Madame Gazelle, who should exit through the driver's door, ends up appearing on the other side of the ambulance without any explanation. It seems like everything concerned with Madame Gazelle is mysterious. In the episode Jumble Sale, Peppa's playgroup is holding a jumble sale to raise money for a new roof. Madame Gazelle asks everyone to bring something to sell. Peppa and each of her friends bring in an old toy. Later in the episode, we can notice Madame Gazelle, Mummy Cat, and Miss Rabbit behind the table, filled with various items. Now let's take a look at Mummy Cat's table. Here we can notice that a toy plane is at one end of the table, and a Jack-in-the-Box is at the other end. But when scene zooms onto her, all of a sudden, the Jack-in-the-Box is now next to the toy plane. But earlier, it was on the other side of the table. Within a split second, it switched its position. In the episode, Granny Sheep Moves In, Peppa and Susie are playing games at Susie's house. Moments later, Mummy Sheep comes in to clean up the room. Now watch carefully. Mummy Sheep carries 3 cardboard boxes and goes into another room. But the mistake is, when they reach the other room, the color of the cardboard box on the top changes to white. But earlier, all the boxes were of the same color. And that's not all. When Mummy Sheep puts down the boxes, the white box magically changes its color. Now, it's back to the original color. The cardboard box seems to have a mind of its own. Now, this next animation error is really funny. In the episode Traffic Jam, Peppa and her family are going to Granny Pig's house for lunch. But on the way, they get stuck in the traffic. If we zoom onto Miss Rabbit's car, we can notice that her ears are sticking out of the roof, which is impossible unless her ears are made out of metal. Moving on, the episode The Perfect Day isn't that perfect at all, because we spotted several animation errors in it. Here, Peppa and her family go to the mall so that Mummy Pig can have a perfect day experience. When the pig family enters Miss Rabbit's spa, we can notice that Mr. Bull is also there getting a massage. Moments later, Peppa, George, and Daddy Pig exit the spa to explore the mall. And while they are doing so, they walk by a china shop. And in the china shop, we can see Mr. Bull. But just a moment ago, he was at the spa getting a massage. Did he just teleport? And that's not all. While exploring the mall, Peppa meets Susie, and they decide to take some funny pictures in the photo booth. If we look carefully, we can notice paintings on both sides of the photo booth. But the mistake is, when they exit the photo booth, the paintings are not there anymore. But earlier, we clearly saw 2 paintings on either side of the booth. But wait, there's one more mistake left in this episode. After having a perfect day, the pig family exits the mall. And if we look at the entrance of the mall, we can notice there are 3 symbols placed on either side of the door. But the issue is, earlier when the pig family was entering the mall, on the left side, there were 4 symbols, not just 3. In the episode School Camp, Peppa and her friends go on a camping trip with their teacher, Madame Gazelle. When they reach the camping spot, we can notice that Peppa is wearing a purple backpack. But the mistake is, when she starts setting up the camp with Susie, her backpack is now red. Within seconds, Peppa's backpack changed colors. And that's not all. When Peppa and Susie are setting up the tent, moments later, the scene zooms out. And if we zoom in at Peppa and Susie, we can notice they're not wearing backpacks at all. Later in the episode, when everyone is sleeping, Susie comes out of her tent with a torch, and we can see that the torch is red-colored. But the mistake is, when Susie reaches Madame Gazelle's tent, the torch is now purple. Seriously, what's up with all these items changing colors within seconds? Moving on, in the episode The Market, Peppa and family take a trip to the market to buy some items. After buying some apples, they go to Miss Cow's stall. Now notice that Daddy Pig is holding a basket with apples in it, and Mummy Pig is standing right behind him. But the issue is, when Daddy Pig gets knocked off to the floor from the smell of the cheese, Mummy Pig and the basket disappear. And that's not all. Moments later, when the pig family goes to Mr. Fox's stall, he shows them a variety of items. Firstly, he shows them a wooden apple, and after that, he shows them plastic cheese. Notice that the wooden apple is still there, but when the scene zooms out, the wooden apple simply disappears. I'm not surprised by this, because there's always something fishy going on with Mr. Fox. In the episode Ice Cream, when Peppa is giving away free ice cream to her friends, notice that Susie asks for a raspberry ice cream, and Mandy asks for a blueberry ice cream.
Raspberry? Can I have blueberry?
However, when Peppa serves ice cream to her friends, Susie gets a mint ice cream, and Mandy gets a strawberry ice cream, but the blueberry ice cream goes to Zoe Zebra. We must say, Peppa isn't that good of an ice cream seller. In the episode Sports Day, it is the sports day at Peppa's school, and the first event is running. While everyone is taking their running stance, Peppa and Susie argue about who is faster. While they argue, the race starts, and Daddy Pig shouts out that the race has already started. Then only Peppa and Susie start running, but it's too late and the winner is Rebecca Rabbit. Now look carefully. When Rebecca Rabbit is presented with the trophy, everyone cheers for her, and Susie Sheep is also one of them. But the issue is, seconds later, when the scene switches, we see Peppa and Susie still on the racetrack arguing with each other. But moments ago, Susie Sheep was with all the students cheering for Rebecca. Did she teleport? In the episode Sailing Boat, Peppa and George go sailing with Grandpa Pig. They get on his boat and realize there is no tide to sail their boat. Soon the tide comes, and the 3 pigs happily sail. But later in the episode, they lose the tide and get stranded in the sea. Now look carefully. When Grandpa Pig is calling Grandma Pig, if we zoom onto the deck, we can notice there is no hatch there. But seconds later, when the scene zooms in, a hatch magically appears in front of Grandpa Pig. And that's not all. Later, when Peppa and George go to bed, we can notice they go to the bed wearing life jacket on top of their regular clothes. But the next morning, when Peppa wakes up, we can notice she's now wearing her nightgown. Maybe she changed her clothes in her dreams. In the episode The Diner, Peppa and family are driving in their large camper van across America to get to Hollywood. While on their journey, they stop at a diner to ask for directions and meet another Miss Rabbit. Later in the episode, Peppa and George are at the diner, orchestrating the dance. Now look carefully at this elephant character. When Peppa tells everyone to be a dinosaur, his tusk simply vanishes and reappears moments later. In the episode Spooky Ghost Hunting, we see that when Peppa and her friends leave the kitchen to look for ghosts, there are 5 pumpkins, 3 bowls on the table. And also, there is nothing on the shelves near the refrigerator except for the clock that says 8 o'clock. And shortly after everyone returns, we can notice that on the left side of the refrigerator, strangely, a large pumpkin appears with a cake that was not there before. And the clock continued to show 8 o'clock. And also on the table, there are now 7 pumpkins plus the 3 bowls. Where did the rest come from? In the episode where Peppa and her family are making a banana split, we noticed some weird errors. At the beginning, we can notice that when Peppa asks Grandma Pig what a banana split is, there's a wooden board with a knife and 5 bananas on the table. After Grandma and George each take 1 banana, we notice that the wooden board is no longer there and only 2 bananas remain on the plate. And also, mysteriously, there is another banana in the ice cream cup. This kitchen seriously seems to be magical. In the episode Detective Peppa, Peppa and George are playing detective to find Teddy. When Peppa enters her room, we can notice that there's a path of breadcrumbs leading the way. Later, when Peppa starts asking questions to Daddy Pig, we can notice that the crumbs aren't there anymore. And that's not all. Later, when Peppa gets out of her bed after finding Teddy, the crumbs are visible again. But the issue is, they are now closer to the door instead of window. Earlier, the crumbs led all the way to the window. Maybe Daddy Pig ate those crumbs. In the episode Tidying Up, Peppa and George have to tidy their bedroom. But while they are tidying their room, they get a little distracted by the toys. Let's look at the room here. As we can see, Peppa's room is not that big, right? But the mistake is, when Daddy Pig comes in Peppa's room to check whether it is cleaned or not, he accidentally steps onto a toy car. And when he's sliding across the room becomes very long. And that's not all. After hearing the noise, Mummy Pig also goes in Peppa's room, but now it's back to its normal size. And also, earlier when Daddy Pig stepped onto the room, this toy basket was behind the door. But when Mummy Pig stepped in the room, it suddenly changed its position to the other side of the door. It seems like even the animators got confused with all this mess. In the episode, Dr. Hamster's tortoise, Dr. Hamster, has come to visit the children and talk about the 3 pets she brought. And when she's talking with the children, we can notice Candy Cat is also there. But later in the episode, when Dr. Hamster realizes her pet tortoise has climbed up the tree, she calls Miss Rabbit's fire engine service. When the fire service crew is going to the location, we can notice a car behind them. But the issue is, Candy Cat is sitting in the back seat. But how could it be possible? Earlier, we saw him in the classroom, but now he's here sitting in the car. Seriously, this is really a weird mistake. In the episode where Daddy Pig teaches the kids how to make their own mud puddles, after all, that's the dream of every child in Peppa's world, we can notice that Peppa is very close to George, Candy Cat, and Susie Sheep. But in the very next scene, we see that Peppa is far away from the other kids, as if by magic. In this same episode, going a bit forward, Daddy Pig shows the kids how the concrete works that he and his team are using to build the new playground for the children. In this scene, we see the kids watching attentively, and George is beside Peppa. But after Daddy Pig gets an idea of stepping into the concrete, Edmund Elephant answers a question about how the concrete will harden quickly. At this moment, we see that George simply disappears from beside Peppa. So you might be wondering, did he fall into the concrete? Thankfully not, because right after this scene, he reappears next to Peppa. In the episode Playgroup Star, Peppa wins her first star for making a wonderful drawing of her house. But Daddy Pig realizes that he has never won a single star and is determined to solve the problem. Moving on to the moment when we see Daddy Pig going to the attic to get a drawing of a dragon that he made when he was a kid, we notice that beside the box with a blue bag on top of it, there is a painting leaning against it with a chest behind Daddy Pig. Then, Daddy Pig finds his old school folder, and we see that first the chest has disappeared, and then we see that the painting is no longer beside the boxes, but behind Daddy Pig, which certainly doesn't make much sense since Daddy Pig didn't touch the boxes, only his old school bag. And that's not all. In the same episode the next day, we see the children take Daddy Pig's drawing of dragon to their school. Here we see several drawings on the school wall, each with a star on them. Notice that there is a butterfly drawing, a carrot, and a small tractor at the top. When Madame Gazelle finally gives the star to Daddy Pig, we notice that the drawings have changed their order and arrangement. The tractor drawing is now right below the butterfly, and the carrot drawing has been moved to the side. Now this next error is really funny. In the episode The Playground, Peppa and George are at the playground with their friends. In one of the scenes, Daddy Pig gets up on the slide, but he gets stuck while sliding down. Poor Daddy Pig. But that's not the mistake here. To help free Daddy Pig, Peppa and her friends get on the slide. Now look carefully at the order here. First it's Peppa, then Susie, Danny Dog, Candy Cat, Rebecca and Pedro. So far so good. But when they successfully free Daddy Pig from the slide, they go down it one by one. But the mistake is, when we see the slide again, Rebecca Rabbit isn't there anymore. And that's not all. When the scene switches towards Daddy Pig, we can notice Rebecca Rabbit jumping from the slide. But the issue is, earlier she was sitting behind Candy Cat, but here she jumped before him. How can it be even possible? This next mistake is really tricky. In the episode Washing, Peppa, George and Mummy Pig go outside to play in the muddy puddles. And while they are doing so, they accidentally splatter some of the mud onto Daddy Pig's white shirt. So, they decide to wash the shirt again. Here, as we can see, Mummy Pig puts the white shirt in the laundry basket and goes in the other room to get more clothes for the washing, and while she's gone, Peppa puts her shirt in the basket. Now, look carefully, because here comes the mistake. After the machine finishes washing, Mummy Pig takes out Peppa's shirt. But look inside the washing machine. It's empty. There aren't any more clothes in there, but we saw Mummy Pig put at least 4 or 5 pieces of clothing in there. But now there is none. And that's not all, we've got one more error here. Later in the episode, Daddy Pig comes home from work and wants his shirt so that he can go outside and play football. Look carefully, in the washing machine we can see a couple of clothes. But after Peppa gives Daddy Pig the shirt, the clothes inside the washing machine have disappeared again. We didn't see anyone take it out, so where did it go? Maybe the washing machine can do magic? Or maybe the animators simply forgot to animate the clothes. In the episode New Shoes, Peppa gets shiny new red shoes from the store. Later in the episode, when it's bedtime for Peppa and George, if we look at George's bed, we can notice that there's nothing. But moments later, his toy dinosaur magically appears beside him. But earlier, we clearly saw there was nothing on his bed. There are 2 explanations for this. First, George was hiding the toy dinosaur under his blanket. And second, the animators made a mistake. Which one do you think is the reason? In the episode Dressing Up, Peppa and George find the old clothes of Mummy and Daddy Pig. So, they decide to wear the dress and pretend to be their parents. Later in the episode, we can notice that Peppa and George's clothes are all muddy, and also Peppa is wearing lipstick. But the mistake is, right when Peppa Pig takes off her dress, we can notice that the lipstick also disappears. I don't think lipstick works like that. Now this next mistake might be the funniest one yet. In the episode Rebecca Rabbit, Peppa and George visit Rebecca's house where they pretend to be rabbits to see how different Rebecca and her family are. Rebecca shows them how to be a rabbit. She also mentions how much rabbits like to eat carrots. Later in the episode, Mummy Rabbit calls them for lunch. Now look carefully, we can see that everyone has got 3 pieces of carrot on their plate. So far so good. But while everyone gets ready to eat, George refuses to eat anything. He hesitates until Daddy Rabbit points out how much a rabbit likes carrots. When the scene zooms onto George, look at Peppa's plate beside his. It's empty. But literally moments ago, there were 3 carrots on her plate. Unless she ate 3 carrots within a millisecond. This is an animation mistake. In the episode, Horsey Twinkletoes, Peppa and George are excited because Mr. Zebra has delivered a package from Aunt Dottie, who lives abroad. When they bring in the package to the kitchen, we can notice that behind them is a cabinet which is relatively small. And also beside the cabinet, there's a recycling bin. So far so good. But the mistake is, when Peppa is taking out the horse toy to play, we can notice that the cabinet behind her, all of a sudden, is longer than before. And not just that, the recycling bin that was beside the cabinet is now replaced by recycling boxes. In the episode Desert Island, Grampy Rabbit, Grandad Dog, and Grandpa Pig go fishing. And if we look at the boat, we can notice there's a flagpole, steering wheel, and a gear lever. But the mistake is, when they sail the boat and reach their destination, we can notice that the gear lever has disappeared. But earlier, it was right there. And that's not all. Later in the episode, the boat sinks, and all 3 Grandpa get stuck on a deserted island. So, Daddy Dog comes to the rescue. When Daddy Dog is about to get on the boat, we can notice that the gear lever of his boat is on the edge, much farther from the steering wheel. But as soon as he gets on the boat, the gear lever has now shifted near the steering wheel. But wait, there's one more. Finally, when Daddy Dog and the kids find the granddads, the gear lever has now disappeared. Seriously, Where do you even find boats like these? Moving on, in the episode Richard Rabbit Comes to Play, Peppa and George are playing in their room when Richard Rabbit arrives. Now let's look at the room here. As we can see, it's quite messy, and the toys are scattered everywhere, and the toy basket is empty. After George invites Richard Rabbit to play in his room, we can now notice that the room is less messy than before, and also the toy basket is now filled with toys. Now you might be thinking that Peppa probably cleaned up the room when George was gone, but that cannot be possible because Peppa was busy making the house with all these blocks. In the episode The Beach, the pig family goes to the beach for a fun day. When they arrive at the beach, Peppa starts taking out the toys from the basket. Notice that she takes out towels, buckets, spades, and the ball. But the mistake is, after Mummy Pig applies sunscreen to Peppa and George, if we look behind them, we can notice the bucket and the spades are now back in the basket. But earlier, we clearly saw Peppa taking out the toys. Going back to the episode, Richard Rabbit Comes to Play, when Susie Sheep enters the room. Right at this moment, if we look at the wall, we can notice there are two drawings. One is of an elephant and other of a fairy. But when the scene zooms out a bit, we can see that the drawings are now in a different position. Now, they are much higher on the wall than before, even higher than the bed. Now this next mistake can be found in the episode Bouncy Ball. Here, Peppa and her friends are playing football. And also, we can notice 4 trees with fruits on them. Now look closely, because seconds later, all the fruits from the trees disappear into thin air. But seconds later, when Rebecca Rabbit scores a goal, the fruits can be seen again. Seriously, what's up with these fruits? In the episode Painting, Peppa and George are painting some pictures. At the beginning, when they are getting the things ready, we can notice there are 3 colors: blue, red, and yellow. Now right here, we can see Peppa dips her brush in the yellow paint, and we can also notice the yellow color in Peppa's brush. But the mistake is, when scene switches from George to Peppa, the color in Peppa's brush disappears. Where did it go? Peppa's canvas is empty, so she definitely didn't use it. And that's not all. Moments later, when the scene again switches from George to Peppa, the brush now has yellow color in it. Is that a magical brush? Going back to the painting episode, right here, we can see Peppa is making her handprint on the canvas. Now, look at the position of the drawing. It's in the middle part of the canvas, right? But the mistake is, when the scene zooms out, the position of the drawing changed. Now the drawing is towards upper part of the canvas, whereas earlier, it was at the middle. In the episode Granny and Grandpa's Attic, Peppa and George go to their grandparents' house to help tidy their attic. Right when they enter the house, we can notice a hanging lamp right above them. But the mistake here is that when they climb up the staircase, we can notice that the hanging lamp is now almost glued to the wall. But earlier, the lamp was hanging up to the ground floor. How's this even possible? Seriously, these mistakes get funnier every time. In the episode Long Train Journey, Daddy Pig receives a letter saying he must go away on business to test some very important concrete. Peppa, Mummy, and George all decide to go with Daddy and enjoy a train journey. The whole pig family goes to the station and waits for the train. When the train arrives, they sit in their respective seats. Now look carefully. When we get a zoomed out view of the train, we notice that a cat is sitting 1 seat behind the pig family. But the issue is, when the train reaches its destination, the same cat can be seen waiting outside the train. Literally, the same character is inside and outside the train at the same time. Are these characters twins or what? Now, this mistake is quite funny. When Daddy Pig asks if he could have a potato to Mummy Pig, we can see there are 5 potatoes inside the pot. So far, so good. But the issue is, seconds later, when Mummy Pig brings the pot towards Daddy Pig, we can notice there are now 6 potatoes in it instead of 5. In the episode New House, Daddy Pig takes Peppa and George to visit the home that Mr. Bull is building. Later in the episode, when the house is ready, Mr. Bull places a swing right beside the house. While Peppa is playing on a swing, their new neighbors, the Wolf family, arrive. Now look carefully. As we can see here, Peppa is on the swing, while the Wolf family exits the car. But when they walk up to the pig family, the swing magically disappears. How can it be possible? A few seconds ago, Peppa was playing on the swing, but now it's no longer there. But that's not all. After Mr. Wolf tests the house to see if it's durable, the swing magically reappears. Now, let's look at another mistake. In the episode Skateboarding, the pig family go to the park. where Daddy Pig teaches Peppa how to skateboard. While Peppa is learning how to ride the board, we notice something weird. Right at this moment, if we look at Peppa's skateboard, we can notice there are 3 smiley faces stickers. Now focus on the position of those 3 stickers. One of the stickers magically changed its position. If we slow down the scene, we can literally see the sticker changing its position from one end to the other. In the episode Trampolines, Peppa's family and friends visit Miss Rabbit's trampoline park. When Miss Rabbit is briefing them, if we look behind her, we can see an empty desk and a rack filled with shoes. After Miss Rabbit finishes her briefing and goes back to her desk, we can now notice there's a blue boot on top of her desk. But earlier the desk was completely empty. And that's not all. Here, if we look at Susie Sheep's shoes, they're blue colored. But when she's taking them off, they are now suddenly purple. Seriously, Peppa Pig's animators seem to have some sort of issues with colors. In the episode Daddy Puts Up a Picture, Mummy Pig has a lovely new picture of Peppa and George, so Daddy Pig offers to put it up. When Daddy Pig is marking the wall, we can notice the toolbox is placed right behind Peppa and George. But moments later, the toolbox conveniently moves near Daddy Pig. And that's not all. Moments later, when Daddy Pig hangs up the picture, the toolbox again goes back to its original position. At this point, we all know about the color-changing magic in Peppa Pig. If you don't know what I'm talking about, in Peppa Pig, where there are different colored objects together, they tend to magically switch colors. Let me show you a live example. In the episode Mountain Climbing, Peppa and her friends visit the sports center. And at the sports center, Grampy Rabbit teaches the children about mountain climbing. If we look at the plastic mountain behind Grampy Rabbit, we can notice most of the edges are blue colored. So far, so good. But moments later, when Susie prepares to climb the wall, we can now notice the edges on the left side are green and yellow. There's not a single blue colored edge there. All the blue edges have now moved towards the right side. But earlier, the left side was filled with blue colored edges. Now this next mistake is really hilarious. In the episode Santa's Grotto, it is Christmas time, and all of the children go to visit Santa's grotto to tell him what they would like for Christmas. When Peppa and her family go to the Christmas fair, we can also see Zoe Zebra and her mother at the fair. But the mistake is, Zoe and her mother are also on the Ferris wheel. You might think that they are different characters of the same species, but it's not possible because they're wearing the exact same clothes. How's this even possible? In the episode Baby Alexander, the pig family are in their kitchen, waiting for the arrival of Baby Alexander. And behind Daddy Pig, we can notice some drawings stuck on the board. For now, just focus on these 2 drawings, the house and the castle. Moments later, when Daddy Pig is talking, and the scene zooms onto him, we can notice the castle drawing behind him. But wait, the house drawing is no longer there. But earlier, the house drawing was right beside the castle one. Going back to the mountain climbing episode, after climbing the small plastic mountain, the kids and Grampy Rabbit prepare to climb the big one. When Grampy Rabbit is giving the instruction, if we look at the mountain, we can see different colored edges, but for now, focus on this pink one only. After Grampy Rabbit finishes his demonstration to climb the mountain, we can notice that the pink edge has now disappeared. But earlier, it was right there. In the episode Ice Cream, when Peppa is giving away free ice cream to her friends, notice that Susie asks for a raspberry flavor, and Mandy asks for a blueberry.
I have raspberry. Can I have blueberry, please?
However, when Peppa serves ice cream to her friends, Susie gets a mint ice cream, and Mandy gets a strawberry ice cream. But the blueberry goes to Zoe Zebra. We must say Peppa isn't that good of an ice cream seller. Now let's look at a logical error. In the episode Parking Ticket, Daddy Pig parks his car in the wrong place and is given a parking ticket. After Miss Rabbit gives Daddy Pig the ticket, she takes a picture of them. Now look carefully. Here we can see there's a pole beside Miss Rabbit with no parking sign on it. Remember, the pole is beside Miss Rabbit. After she takes the picture, the pig family goes back to their home. At home, they look at the picture taken by Miss Rabbit. And in the picture, we can see the pole with no parking sign. How did the pole get in the picture? Earlier, we clearly saw Miss Rabbit taking the picture from the front of the car while the pole was beside her. There's no way the pole could appear in the picture frame from that angle. This is what we call a logical error.